Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. We're so excited to have you here today. My name is Janet Todd, and I am the Director of Curriculum Development in the Education and Wellness Department at CPG. And my job is to work on all of the curriculum for our educational materials. And as Cindy said, that we will be recording this presentation, and we are going to be doing the presentation first, and then we will be taking a question and answer session at the end so that we can edit out the Q&A session so that you can feel free to ask your questions and know they're not going to be posted on our website. Um, as we go through the presentation, as you're thinking of your questions, if you want to enter them into the question and answer box, feel free to do so. And if you want to, and then we'll come back to them and pick them up at the end of the session. And if you want to ask anonymously, there is a box you can check that says to ask anonymously, so we won't know who is asking the question. And now I'm going to pass it on to my colleague and my favorite boss, Kathleen Floyd.
Hi, everyone. And Janet, that's really good because we're going to performance reviews shortly.
Yes, we
And
are.
I'm very excited to have this seminar, this webinar for the deacons. We've been very excited about changes to the clergy pension plan that now result in deacons being able to participate in a lot of our activities. My job in particular is I run the education and wellness group, which means we run about 100 conferences a year. Not this year, but usually we run about 100 conferences a year. And that includes things like Credo and Planning for Wellness. So that will be conferences that deacons that are part of the pension fund will be able to attend. Next slide, Janet. Let me talk a little bit about CPG. We support, our purpose is to serve clergy and lay employees of the Episcopal Church. And how we do this is through three lines of businesses. The first one is for employee benefits. So we provide income, and life and disability and health benefits through our benefits group. Just to give you some idea on what we've been doing, the clergy pension started in 1917, so it's over 100 years old. Life insurance started in 1922, health benefits in 1978. The lay pension started in 1980, and retirement savings, which is our RSVP, which Janet will talk about later, started in 1996. And in 1998, we began to provide disability. So you can see there's a wide breadth of employee benefits that we provide to the clergy and lay employees of the Episcopal Church. The second line of business that we have is our property and casualty business. And in that, we insure the buildings and workmen's compensation for the majority of the churches throughout the Episcopal Church. And last but not least, we have publishing. Where we do the hymnals and other resources that people use as their ministries grow. Next slide. So we want to make sure that you are in our books and that we know who you are. So there are different things that you should look at. So if you are ordained, you want to file with our recorder of ordinations, and they're at CPF. And you can make sure you are in our records. You can check by logging into ECD. You need your client number to do that. If you don't have a client number, go to client services for your client number. If client services doesn't have a client number for you, then you know that you need to contact your diocesan office to file your ordination. There are many deacons out there that we do not have a file for, so we want to solve that problem And if you're not in our records, go to your diocesan ordination office and make sure that it's filed. The diocesan ordination office is used as a CPG website to report the ordinations. And once done, you are in our system, but it only has your name and your ordination date. Okay, so you want to make sure that you get all of these things done so that you can be in the Episcopal Clergy Directory. It's a biennial directory of all living clergy in good standing in the Episcopal Church. And right now there's more than 18,000 deacons, priests, and bishops, and it includes full biographical information. So you want to make sure that you're in there. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to talk about the clergy pension plan. And the clergy pension plan is a defined benefit plan. So what that means is that the employer pays assessments. Janet will go into it, but it's an 18% assessment. The plan sponsor, which in this case is CPG, controls those investment decisions. What that means is that we take on the risk. That means no matter what, you will be paid your pension. In a 401k situation, there's risk of the plan going up and down. In a defined benefit situation, the plan sponsor controls the investment decision. And then you get a pension, and the pension is based on a formula regardless of the investment performance. So we're going to go over today what that formula is, so that you would be able to calculate your pension benefits based on the number of years that you've worked plus the amount that you've been paid. So we'll go over and how that all works. Janet, next slide. You can find all this information in the Guide to Clergy Benefits. So if you go to on our website, Active Clergy, and then Forms and Publications, it'll be right there. And today we're just doing an overview because that's how much time we have. But once you go into your clergy guide, it'll have all sorts of information there, much more in depth than we have. And then if you have questions, you can always call client services and get answers to the questions. But hopefully we'll be able to answer a lot of them today. So now I'm going to turn it over to Janet, and she's going to go over the terms and what of the pension plan, and then I'll see you back at the end to go over some resources. Janet?
Thank you, Kathy. So today, the way we're going to do the presentation is we're going to do it as a case study, and we're going to be looking at Deacon Taylor. And we're going to first start and look at how Deacon Taylor can become a clergy plan participant. We're going to look at the benefits that being a plan participant will get her. We're going to look at a cost-benefit analysis of being in the plan. So as we go through the plan, we'll be talking about all the benefits, and then we'll just bring it all together so you can see it all in one place. And then as Kathy mentioned, she will be coming back for doing some resources and some of the other benefits that are outside of the pension plan that you are eligible for. And then we will end with a question and answer session where we'll pick up all of the questions that you are putting in Q&A. And also at that time is when we'll ask you if you want to click on the raise hand button and actually just verbally provide your question. So let's begin with becoming a clergy pension plan participant. So again, we're going to be using Deacon Taylor. And we're going to be assuming that Deacon Taylor runs St. Gregory Church's Ministry to the Homeless. She is currently 62 years old and she's non-stipendiary. So St. Gregory's and Deacon Taylor start discussing what it would look like if Deacon Taylor was able to participate in the clergy pension plan. And they wonder, what are the costs and what are the benefits that she would get? So they decide to look at, let's pay $25 per month. And I believe the New York Diocese has just passed a resolution or passed something at their convention similar to this. So now that Deacon Taylor is going to be paid $25 per month. Let's look to see if she's eligible to participate in the pension plan. So the mandatory criteria is that she's ordained, which she is. She's scheduled to be regularly employed for 5+ consecutive months with the same employer and is compensated. So Deacon Taylor has compensation of scheduled $25 per month, and she is scheduled to have that employment for more than 5 months, consecutive months, because her contract is going to run over a 2-year period. So she fits the mandatory criteria. Regularly employed also means, though, you also have to meet one of the following criteria of a letter of agreement, a contract of employment, or to be duly called by a bishop, vestry, or rector, or to have a formal title indicating substantial ongoing relationship, or issued a W-2, or scheduled to work 20+ hours per week. And she only has to meet one of those, regularly employed. So it appears that Deacon Taylor meets the eligibility and participation rules. There are some exceptions in place for short-term service, but under this example, they don't apply to Deacon Taylor. So now that we're assuming that Deacon Taylor has is called by a priest and has a letter of agreement stating that she is scheduled to receive $25 per month, and her employment is to head the ministry for the homeless, and it's renewable every 2 years, Deacon Taylor needs to be enrolled in the clergy pension plan. And the way to do that is her employer is going to get online, and they're going to enroll her using the employment change form in the employee roster. Your employer should know how to do this, because that is how all of the priests who are serving in your churches, or if you're working for the diocese, that is how they are entered into our plan. So you can also, if you want, submit a paper form, which you can find on our website. The only benefit to the paper form is that it does have some information that we're going to be talking about, but most of the information is also in the guide. But if you're interested in what the employer is putting into employee roster, you can take a look at the form so that you can see what information they will need. Okay. Now, I'm going to take a little bit of an aside here, because there are some deacons who may not be working for a church that is under the authority of the Episcopal Church. So, for instance, maybe they're working for an organization that is associated with the Episcopal Church, but not under the authority, and that particular group has not um, decided to participate in the clergy pension plan. Or maybe you're working outside of the Episcopal Church, but your work is of a pastoral, education, or social nature, and it does further the ministry of the Episcopal Church. You might be able to get what's called an extension of ministry. So your bishop, and if it's outside your diocese, the geographical bishop of that particular diocese where you're working, would have to agree, and you would have to submit an extension of ministry form. And then the church pension fund would look at it, and they would, if they also agree that this is an extension of ministry, then you would have the option of either you paying the assessments based on your salary, or your employer paying the assessments, or a combination of both. But you would have the ability to also be in the plan in that sense. So I just wanted to put that out there in case some of you are doing ministry, but it's not within the Episcopal Church. So let's go back to Deacon Taylor. And so we know that Deacon Taylor is now enrolled, because her employer has filed all the work in the employee roster, and she's now a participant in the clergy pension plan. And that means St. Gregory's is going to have to pay assessments on that $25 per month that they're going to pay her. So what does that mean? Well, that means that we have to calculate her total assessable compensation. And the way we calculate that is by taking the sum of these 5 items. One is the base salary, and that does not include anything that might be declared as housing allowance and any other scheduled taxable cash payment. Item 2 is any cash housing allowance or any utilities that are paid on Taylor or Deacon Taylor's behalf. Item 3 is any employer contributions to a qualified or non-qualified plan. What that means is a 401k, 403b type plan. And we're going to talk about the clergy pension plan's sponsored retirement savings vehicle in a later slide. That is not a common number to be filled in for most clerics. And then number 4 would be any one-time payments. So for instance, say that Deacon Taylor has done a really good job with the mission that she's running. And at Christmas time, the church would like to give her an appreciation gift. And it's a payment that's coming from the church. So it would be put in as a one-time payment. And then from my work at some of the conferences like AED, with the deacons, I've talked to several deacons, and some of them have said that they actually live in a church rectory. So the value of that employer provided housing is also assessable compensation. And the way you don't need to provide us that number, we will calculate that number. And how we will do it is one of 2 ways. We'll add up numbers 1 through 4 based on what is submitted through ER, and we'll multiply it by 30%, and that will be the value of the employer housing. And so we'll take number 5 and we'll add it to 1 through 4 to get your total assessable compensation. Or if the 1 through 4 is less than $1,500 a month, which is what we call the hypothetical minimum compensation, we would multiply the hypothetical minimum compensation by 30% and consider that the value of your employer provided housing for the sake of calculating this total assessable compensation. Now, if you're not in church provided housing, you don't need to worry about number 5 at all. If you are in church provided housing, your employer will check a box that says you are, and we will do the calculation. So for Deacon Taylor, her total assessable compensation is $25 per month times the 12 months, or $300 a year. So that's what's reported. It's reported on an annual basis. Now, it's going to be reported as base salary in item number 1 in the the employee roster. However, Deacon Taylor does have the option, because she's cleric, to have St. Gregory's designate this in their vestry minutes as housing allowance. If she so chooses, then you would report it to the pension fund as 2, cash housing allowance or utilities. Okay. Another option is Deacon Taylor could choose to take that $25 per month and open up an RSVP, or a retirement savings program, which is a 403B program sponsored by the CPG. And it is our service provider is Fidelity, and the $25 per month could go into that account. If that happens, you cannot have the money listed as cash housing allowance. You can't claim it as cash housing allowance on your taxes, because the money going into the 403B is on a pre-tax basis. So you could choose either to take it as a housing allowance, take it as cash, or put it into the RSVP program as a pre-cash contribution. Just one of those 3 items. Okay. So the assessments then that are going to be paid to the pension fund by St. Gregory's on behalf of Deacon Taylor will be 18% times the $25 per month they pay her, or $4.50 per month. So they will get billed at the beginning of the month, and they will make a payment by the end of the month. And that will come out to $54 per year. So with this $4.50 being paid per month, what are the benefits that Deacon Taylor has of being a plan participant? Well, first of all, each month that St. Gregory's pays the $4.50 assessment to the pension fund, she will receive 1 month of credited service because there is no minimum dollar amount that needs to be paid to earn credited service toward pension benefits. Okay, so she'll get 1 month of credited service for the pension benefits. Also note that enrollment in our plan can only begin at the first of the month. So if if employment begins at the 15th, then your employer will enroll you into the plan, but you won't actually start being billed until the first of the following month. The only time that doesn't happen is if you're enrolled at the first of the month, then that will be the month where you will get the first billing for assessments. And if they're paid, you will get credited service for that particular month as well. Okay. So as long as St. Gregory's continues to pay credited assessments each month, Deacon Taylor will be earning credited service. So how does that translate into her basic benefit? Well, the formula is the highest average compensation, which is our HAC, and we call it the HAC, times CS, which is credited service earned over the time of Deacon Taylor's enrollment in the plan, and earning of credited service times 1.6% plus the first $10,000 of her hack times credited service times 1.15%. So her highest average compensation is generally the highest paid 12-month periods over the cleric's career. So what that means is we take 12-month consecutive time periods to make one of those 12-month periods, and they do not have to be annual or calendar year. So they could start in May of one year and end in April of the following. The only requirement is that no month can be overlapping in any two of those time periods. So the months need to be consecutive, but the time periods themselves do not. We will choose the highest 12 over the highest 7 over your career. If for some reason you have less than 7 years of compensated employment during which credited service is earned, we will use your career average. In other words, the average of that time frame you were there. So let's look at Deacon Taylor's example. So we're assuming that her highest average compensation is going to be $300 because we are not assuming any change in compensation over the time period. So she's going to get $25 per month for as long as she's working. And we're going to assume then that each 12-month time period that we use is going to be 12 times 25 or 300. So the average is going to be $300 of those 7 highest 12-month time periods. The credited service for pension that she earns, we're going to assume that she retires at age 72. And I know that there are some things going on in the chat here about age 72 being the maximum time. And yes, that's correct. Age 72 is the mandatory retirement age, and we can no longer accept any assessments beyond age 72. No more credited service can be earned. So to make the math easy, we're just going to assume that she earned credited service of 10 years from age 62 to age 72. Now, in order to get a pension, you have to be vested. And the requirements for being vested are you have to earn at least 5 years of credited service, or you have to attain age 65 and be in what's called active status to be vested. And active status means that assessments are being paid on your behalf because you are regularly employed in a tech or with an extension of ministry. And yes, Deacon Taylor, she meets both of those criteria, although she only needs to meet one of those. because when she turned 65, assuming all of her assessments have been paid, she would have only earned 3 years of credited service, but she would have been considered vested at that point. Once you are vested, you are then eligible for a retirement benefit. So let's do Deacon Taylor's calculation. Deacon Taylor's calculation is her highest average compensation is $300. Her credited service earned is 10 times the 1.6%. The first 10,000 of highest average compensation is equal to $300 because that is her highest average compensation, times the 10 times the 1.15%. So her annual pension basic benefit calculation is $82.50. Now, the clergy pension plan has a minimum pension clause into it. And what that minimum pension clause says is that you can earn up to, we use it based on the 2-person federal poverty level limit. And based on the minimum pension that's in effect in 2020, the cleric's annual pension benefit in this example, Deacon Taylor's, would be $300. So it's based on how many years of credited service, the 2-person federal poverty limit, but it is capped at the clergy's hack. And in this case, that's why it would be $300 because it's being capped at Deacon Taylor's hack. Since it's a relatively small amount of money, $300 per year, the pension fund will calculate the value of that and the value of another benefit called the Christmas benefit, which I'll talk about the calculation on the next slide. And if the present value, meaning the value of all the payments we expect to pay from retirement until Deacon Taylor is at actuarial end of life, if the value of that is less than $20,000, then we would just pay a lump sum. So instead of getting the $300 per year, then we would pay her just a lump sum at retirement. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this in the cost benefit analysis and talk about what that number might be. Okay, so that's the calculation. In this case, she would qualify for a minimum. Now, there are other benefits that go around, and some of them have eligibility requirements, which basically most of those eligibility requirements are based around you must retire in active status. So that ongoing benefit is the Christmas benefit I mentioned, and that's $25 times credited service, which is $25 times the 10 years of service she earned, or $250. That is paid one time in December, and it would be paid every year, except in this case, we would take that $250, we would add it to the $300 minimum pension benefit that Deacon Taylor would be eligible for based on the 2020 minimum numbers. And we would calculate the present value of receiving that benefit, that $550 a year for her actuarial life, to see if it was $20,000 or less. And if so, we would pay it as a lump sum. Now, there's some other one-time benefits that you get, and one is the resettlement benefit. The resettlement benefit is a one-time benefit given at retirement to help clergy resettle somewhere else, because oftentimes you're asked to, or you're going to leave that particular church, you're going to move to some other area, and the value of it is 12 times your monthly benefit. Now, this monthly benefit is based on the calculated monthly benefit, not the minimum benefit. And it has a minimum of $2,000 and a maximum of $20,000. So 12 times the 8250 is less than $20,000. So Deacon Taylor would also get a check for $20,000 at retirement. Deacon Taylor would also, while she's in retirement, be
Janet,
eligible for, yes,
Janet, she would get
yes.
he or she would get a check for $2,000, not
Oh, I'm
$20,000.
sorry. I did say 20. I meant 2. I'm sorry. I was looking at the max number. Thank you for correcting me. Yes, $2,000, because that would be the minimum that we would give her. The retiree life insurance benefit would be 6 times her highest average compensation, up to a maximum of $50,000. We said in the example that her highest average compensation was $300. So 6 times the $300 would give her an $1,800 retiree life insurance benefit that she could put anybody she wanted as the beneficiary to that. Now, since Deacon Taylor is eligible for a lump sum benefit, she would not be getting any COLA, cost of living increases over time if they were provided. However, if there are some deacons out there who are working and getting more than this amount that would, and their benefit was such that it was a greater present value than 20,000, so they were receiving monthly checks, they would be eligible for a cost of living increase if given by the pension fund. And they're discretionary benefits because they are looked at every year and it's decided whether or not the fund can afford them for um, that year and then ongoing into the future. There's also a 65 plus Medicare supplement health plan. So as you know, when you turn 65 and you're not working anymore, you are eligible for Medicare. Medicare A and B, and I'm not going to get into a lot of detail here, but Medicare A and B do not pay for everything. And so most people buy some type of supplement plan or some type of Medicare Advantage plan in place of the supplement plan. The church pension fund sponsors or has a 65 plus Medicare supplement health plan that our medical trust runs. And you have the ability to earn a subsidy toward it, but you have to earn that hypothetical minimum compensation per month and have assessments paid on that value or more in order to earn credited service toward that. So in this case, Deacon Taylor has access to this supplement health plan, but would not get a subsidy because her compensation is only $25 per month. So it would have to be more to have access to that. And I bring this up only because she does have access. She could buy this plan. And in order to be able to buy it, you have to have at least 5 years of credited service in the plan. Okay. To get a subsidy, you have to have compensation of $1,500 a month or more and have assessments being paid on that. And you have to earn at least 10 years of credited service at that level in order to be eligible for the beginning of a subsidy. Okay, so if anybody is earning more and wants to learn more about that, we can talk about that later. But for this example, she has access to, but does not get a subsidy. Now, there are also some other benefits while she is in active service, not necessarily after retirement, but while she's in active service. And these are death and disability benefits. And it says eligibility may apply because there are some pieces, some of these that you only get if you are active. Some of these have a little bit of extra benefit tucked inside them, but because she only earns $25 a month, most of these benefits are going to be somewhat negligible. However, her life insurance, which is calculated as 6 times her total assessable compensation, which is $300 a year, you can get a maximum of $150,000 of life insurance. She would have an $1,800 life insurance policy on her while she is actively working and assessments are being paid on her behalf. And she could have anyone she wanted listed as her beneficiary. If for some reason she died before retirement while she was active, there is a pre-retirement survivor benefit. So the 50% of the benefit that she would be eligible for at retirement that we just talked about would be available to the survivor. If it's a minimum benefit, it's a little bit more than 50%. If she has any eligible children, which would be child that is under the age of 25 and is a dependent, or is disabled before 25 and is a dependent, there would be a benefit available for the eligible child, and that is capped at HAC, or highest average compensation. If there are multiple children, they would share that capped value. And then there's a short-term and long-term disability available, but again, it would be based on her $25 that she's earning per month, so it would be a very small amount. However, for any deacons out there that might be earning more, you may be interested in seeing what your benefit eligibility would be, and we can discuss that a little bit later as well. Okay, so this is the array of benefits and costs that would be associated with Deacon Taylor's example. So let's put this together in the cost benefit analysis. So this is the slide that's going to show that side by side. So our assumptions are that we have a total average compensation of $300 per year, or $25 a month. Credited service earned over the years is 10. The highest average compensation is $300 because we assumed no change in her total assessable compensation throughout her career. The cost for her employer would be the salary that they pay her over the 10 years. So the $300 times the 10 years is $3,000. And the total assessments that are paid over her career would be 18% times the total assessable compensation times the 10 years, or $540. So that's the cost to the employer. So what were her benefits? Let's pull them together. So while she was active, she had a life insurance of $1,800. She had a retiree life insurance once she retired of $1,800 as well, because in this case, her total assessable compensation, which is the TAC, and her highest average compensation, which is the HAC, were the same. Her annual pension benefit was $82.50 based on the calculations, but we noted that because she had a minimum pension, or was eligible for the minimum pension, she would get, based on the 2020 numbers, $300. And she would get an annual Christmas benefit of $250. And then the resettlement benefit of $2,000. And thank you, Kathy, again for correcting my misstatement earlier. So what would that look like? Well, her annual pension of the minimum of $300 would be added to that annual Christmas benefit of $250 to get $550. Assuming that 20 years is an actuarial value if Deacon Taylor retired today, and that 4% was the appropriate interest rate, the value of those payments over her retirement life would be about $7,400. Now, remember, this is just an approximation. This isn't a guaranteed number. It could be more, it could be less. It all depends on the interest rates that are appropriate at the time and the actuary tables that are available at the time. So she would get the $7,400 approximately as a lump sum for her pension benefit and her Christmas benefit, and she would get a resettlement benefit of $2,000. So for a salary of $3,000 and a cost of $540 of assessments for a benefit, she would get back about $10,000. So that is the benefit of even a small amount of payment for a deacon, which is hopefully not a strain on the employer, but provides the deacon with a nice little amount, a nest egg at retirement. Now, this money, if given as it's given as a lump sum, if Deacon Taylor had opened the RSVP and had been putting her $25 into the RSVP, she would have at least $3,000 of principal added into that RSVP, and hopefully some positive returns on however it was invested. Plus, she could then roll over the resettlement benefit and this lump sum benefit. So in her RSVP, she could have around 13-ish thousand dollars plus or minus any earnings over time. Now, the only thing is if she does retire at age 72, a small amount for the required minimum distribution would not be allowed to be rolled into the RSVP because that's when the government requires you to put the money in. So the benefit is the money goes in tax-free into the RSVP. It's going to earn tax-free over time. And the benefit of the RSVP is that when a clergy takes that money out, if their pension benefit isn't enough to cover housing, and in this case, because she's lump summed out, she's not going to be receiving a monthly pension benefit over time, the money that's taken out of the RSVP can be declared as housing allowance, and it could come out tax-free as long as she's within the IRS limits. And we do have a housing allowance course in our e-learning section that Kathy will talk about in a minute that you can discuss, you can figure out how to use that housing allowance. So that'd be money going in tax-free, earning tax-free, excuse me, and potentially coming out tax-free. All right, now I'm going to turn it over to Kathy for some resources.
Great. And I'm going to go through these rather quickly because I'm up to 17 questions and I want to make sure that we answer all your questions. So Janet, next page. Janet, next page. Okay. I think you skipped a page, but that's okay. We just want to make sure that everybody goes into, please let us know any changes that you have, changes in address, changes in marriage. You could see all of these different life-changing activities. And the forms can be found at cpg.org, forms and publications. And you can also go, next slide, to my CPG account. And with your going to my CPG account, you could save time, make any changes that you need. And we have a whole system where your personal information is protected. Janet, let's keep going. So these are all the CPG resources that we have to support you. We have webinars and workshops. We have client services to answer your questions. We have financial calculators so you could calculate your retirement benefits. We have the Cigna EAP, which really helps you in case you, they have 10 free counseling services. So you could go to a therapist for 10 times. We have a learning center, an e-learning library. We have complimentary individual financial discussions. There's the medical trust. We have, what's really good is a tax hotline. You could call if you have tax questions. You could also have your accountant call. And we have care management programs, and Fidelity helps with some of our webinars, and they manage our RSVP plan. Next slide. So many people who are deacons have asked me about going to Credo, and going to Credo is one of the benefits that you can get from being part of the clergy pension plan. So let me explain just a little bit about Credo. It's a 7-day program where we really spend quality time in 5 areas, which is finance, physical health, psychological health, vocational, and spiritual. And it has a group of 30 people that go together and go through this whole community building process, and it's been very successful, and we're hoping that a lot of deacons would be interested in attending. The planning for wellnesses are programs that you would do with your spouse. We do them by diocese. We go to every diocese once every 5 years, and we spend more time talking about not only the pension plan that Janet's been talking about, but also spending time looking at health and psychological and physical health. Next, Janet. We have a learning center And what's really exciting for us is that for a long time, the Learning Center was behind a firewall. And that would mean that people who were non-stipendiary could not get in. And now we've moved it to being right front and center on the website. So if you go to the website for active clergy, you could go right into the e-learning library. And we have a number of courses there, such as SMART goals, nutrition, understanding the clergy pension fund, understanding the housing allowance, the RSVP plan, Social Security, financial fraud. There's a lot of different courses there, and there are more to come. We're going to do 5 years to retirement and Medicare next. And the next slide. And I'm super excited about this because it is less than a week old. And that is our podcast. The name of our podcast is Choose Well, and it goes through a series of conversations with experts in the fields of finance and health. And, it's just amazing. So I really would like everyone to log on. It's at www.choosewellpodbeam.com and listen to our podcast. I think you'll find them fascinating. Janet? And then more resources. We have the client services. You could call them anytime. We do complimentary financial discussions, and it doesn't necessarily only have to be about your pension. It could be about student loans or managing debt or setting up a budget. And we have a team of people who will talk one-on-one with you to discuss any financial issues that you may have. And then once again, we have the tax hotline. We have we have 3 people on tax hotline, one of which is a native Spanish speaker. So it's open to everyone. Janet, next slide. And then you can follow us. You could follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and we do financial tips on Tuesday and wellness Wednesdays. And we have a lot of different interesting things on both Facebook and Twitter. So and Instagram. So feel free to go and check us out there.